Hey everyone, Tankenstein here. In this video, I'm going to do something a little bit different. Rather than help you play the game by creating a guide video like I normally do, I'm going to go over something that I've noticed quite a bit in both the War Thunder community and Gaijin these past few weeks and months. Now, before I get into any of this, please know that I'm trying to look at this from as unbiased of a perspective as possible, and from the viewpoint of someone who loves this game and has played it for nearly the entire time that has been available to play. There are some troubling things that going on in the community and with Gaijin. Now, I went through around 2 or 3 drafts trying to nail down what I want to discuss in this video, and please, if you have any ideas or thoughts regarding what is in this video, let me know in the comments. I want this video to be as free and as open of a discussion as is possible on YouTube. If you think I'm wrong, tell me. If you think I'm right, let me know. I just want to know how everyone's feeling about this topic. That said, the topic covered in this video is the enormous amount of complaints that have been occurring in recent days, largely from big name YouTubers, as well as the largely negative atmosphere generated from them. I will not name these people, nor will I disagree with many of their arguments, as they do have largely valid concerns. I will, however, argue that the complaining, especially from the YouTubers, has gotten out of hand. Before I continue, I realize I will be probably chewed up for this video, so let the feast commence. I personally, despite having a fraction of the subscribers of some of the bigger name YouTubers, have received many comments stating how refreshing it is to see someone who isn't complaining about War Thunder, but rather remains positive about it. Now, while I do have some gripes about the game, as many people do, I feel that it is, by and large, a very good game with excellent mechanics that can oftentimes be prone to the occasional issue. The hot topic of the month this time happens to be the BR changes that Gaijin wants to enact, largely centering around the Leopard 1 going from 7.7 to 7.3 BR in Ground RB, and a proposed change that will no longer happen that would have substantially changed the BR of the M48C or G variant in the German tech tree. Let me know which one it was in the comments below, it's just not coming to mind as of the writing of this video. I believe it would have dropped the BR of this M48 variant by around 0.6, which would have large implications on the gameplay for tanks fighting it. This said, most of these problems could likely be solved with BR decompression, at least temporarily. I think it would be more of a permanent fix for ground forces, or at least a longer lasting fix than with air, due to the fact that we've basically reached the most modern tanks in the world, whereas planes in War Thunder are basically still, as of the recording of this video, stuck in the late 1950s and early to mid 1960s. But this all said, back to the main point of this video, and why I felt compelled to make it. Now I feel like I'm going to have to defend myself this entire video due to the vitriol that has been stirred up amongst the community against Gaijin, with no small part being due to bigger YouTubers enraging people. This said, one of the biggest problems with this game is just what I described that I'll be defending myself against. People being riled up about the changes that will likely have very little effect on how they play. I say this because as of right now, the affected vehicles, meaning the vehicles in the BR range of the Leopard 1, among some other vehicles like the Centurion, only constitute a very small percentage of this game's vehicles. Something like 1 to 3% of all vehicles in total of this game, if my very rough estimation is correct. This is not to say that the Leopard 1 should go from 7.7 to 7.3, or that some of the other BR changes are justified, because I don't believe the most controversial changes are justified, and I'll go over why in just a few moments. What I am becoming disappointed with is how some of the big YouTubers are beginning to make complaint videos about this game constantly. Heck, even this could be considered a complaint video, what I'm making right now, but I'd rather look at it as a video essay or an opinion video, as I'm not going over how War Thunder is now, and I quote, literally unplayable, as some big YouTubers say, because of a small BR change to a vehicle that can be penned with consistency by nearly every tank in the game. I'm speaking about the Leopard 1. Complete videos are almost a weekly occurrence with some of these people, even if they only make 1 or 2 videos per week anyways. It's gotten to the point of laziness. Why make actual content when you can just trash the game that you profit from with YouTube ad revenue, among other things like merchandise and Patreon? I can understand the concern that these people may have if they feel like they might need to switch games to make content, or that their viewer base will dwindle if the game has more people leaving than joining, but the state of complaint videos is getting out of hand and is becoming more destructive to the player base than constructive. Now, I'm not claiming that I myself am some kind of god king of YouTube, because a good chunk of my videos are, well, amateurish, as evidenced by the fact that despite having 400 videos on YouTube, give or take, I still can't even get the sound right, nor do I use any advanced editing techniques. Self-critique aside, it's gotten to the point where even though some of these YouTubers have, again, valid points, like pushing for BR decompression, changes to how the BR changes and system both work, among other things, they've begun exaggerating issues to such an extent that people are forgetting about how great this game is and how great it can be. Some of the worst offenders of these YouTubers have basically gotten to the point, and I hate to say it, where they're like the news that has people believing that the world has gone to trash, even though we are technically living in the most peaceful time in the last few thousand years of human history. These YouTubers, despite their good points, have become veritable chicken littles, crying about how the world, or in this case, War Thunder, is going to end. War Thunder still has plenty of life left, and despite its misgivings, like a somewhat mediocre BR system, lack of responsiveness of Gaijin to the community, and a lack of foundational updates to the game, has shown itself to still be an excellent game, at least in the absence of true competitors. I'll go over my other faults that I found with this game in just a moment, but I'll portray it in a proportionate way for how big of a deal I feel that these faults are, which I feel is something that most people tend to exaggerate, especially these YouTubers. Speaking of competitors, at least Gaijin is still nowhere near as bad as Wargaming, as they create fake vehicles for money in their world of games, don't model any vehicles realistically, and would charge people quite literally for pay-to-win ammunition. Though I'm not saying that this is the bar that sets the standard, but it could be worse for Gaijin. Trust me. Between War Thunder and World of Tanks, I probably spent upwards of 10 years playing both, with about 75% of my time in War Thunder as opposed to 25% of my time in World of Tanks many moons ago. This said, let's get back to War Thunder. When a vehicle like the MiG-21 PFM, for example, came out, many people trashed it right off the bat. Many of these people, especially the reviewers, hardly had any mods unlocked on it and were essentially reviewing stock vehicles, calling it trash as though they've never experienced a stock grind in War Thunder before. Newsflash, almost all vehicles in this game suck when they're stock. Furthermore, they only looked at it from the perspective of RB Air. A not insignificant portion of this player base, even through upper tiers, plays an arcade, which has been forgotten about by most YouTubers, unfortunately. Now, this all said, regarding the PFM, I feel that the BR decrease that it received did make it more usable, because even though it was not the trash that people claimed it was, it legitimately did suffer some deficiencies at 10.0 BR that have been partially or mostly corrected at 9.7 BR. This example is but one of many, however, of the flash reactions that people have to new vehicles, gameplay changes, and everything else in War Thunder that takes more than a few days to get used to. Volumetric shells were much the same, though War Thunder has not perfected it even still, and has to a point botched volumetric shells, especially with some arrangements of armor plates effectively doubling armor. The uproar was huge when this change was first released. Before volumetric shells, all shells were modeled as being as large as a 50 caliber round, meaning that anything from 20mm cannons through the largest cannons in the game would all be able to fit through the same pixel-wide spots on tanks. In the months since volumetric shells have been updated, people have gotten used to it and have accepted it as being, for the most part, an improvement to gameplay, despite some of the larger faults that it displays on occasions. This is all despite the uproar that was largely led by YouTubers that came out right when these changes were first made. As always, Gaijin did an imperfect launch, as they do with some vehicles, and then patched it within a fairly short amount of time. One exception to this could be the Harrier GR1, when that was first released, because Gaijin must have known how ridiculously OP it was at 9.3 BR, and likely felt that they could make an easy profit from it, being as close to pay to win as any vehicle I've ever seen at any BR in this game. Occasional botched, whether on purpose or not, vehicle releases aside, I feel Gaijin has done a pretty decent job getting BRs correct, or mostly correct, for most vehicles upon release. All of this aside, back to my main point once again. With all the quick and largely negative reactions to almost every change or update that Gaijin has implemented in recent years, especially by those of whom have the largest audience, dealing with the War Thunder Content Creator Club is almost like walking through a virtual minefield. To this point, if Gaijin releases the F-14 or even some basic swing wing plane, the player base would go wild. It's like giving candy to a baby. Even though the players would love it, the content creators will inevitably tell you why you should hate it and why the game isn't ready for this technology. While I think some things such as BRD compression are a must in the lead up to the addition of more advanced planes, I feel that with strong beta testing, War Thunder is ready for the release of swing wing planes within 2 or 3 major patches, if nothing else, within the year of 2021. In this regard, it works great until the baby starts crying again, and this crying is being led by a cabal of constantly hypercritical content creators. Ultimately, with the creator base making constantly negative videos, of which seem to indicate a player base that largely dislikes War Thunder, despite my own experiences where the player base is largely positive about the game, according to the comments that I receive on my own videos, it's creating an atmosphere where no one can be content with War Thunder. While we should definitely hold Gaijin accountable for their errors, especially if we're giving the snail our hard-earned money, I feel that we could really start to have a better time with this game if we block out the negativity constantly streaming in from the most vocal players. We can approach Gaijin in a constructive manner and, as other YouTubers have suggested, have some sort of player-based council that interacts with mods and devs in order to enact positive change. The constant negativity, I feel, will only serve to increase the issues that we see from Gaijin, and while a quick and harsh response to some things, like the Harrier GR1 release, is sometimes necessary, we in the War Thunder YouTuber community really need to step up our game collectively to be positive forces for change. We are doing very little, if any good, being negative people, whereas we can enact more positive change by being constructive in how we approach War Thunder. Now, this all said, Gaijin is not without sin, and I cannot make a video criticizing the divisiveness caused by some content creators without offering some of my own views on what needs to be both fixed and improved in War Thunder. This said, in reference to those gripes I mentioned before, I'll go over them now in terms of what is immediately necessary to improve the game and what should be added in the near future. Some of these things have been discussed by many people, including YouTubers, forum posters, and really almost anyone that you could think of in the community. Now, for necessities, number one, this is probably the most important thing, server stability and improvement, being that at this point a large portion of matches don't even allow half the team to spawn in before 2 or 3 minutes have already elapsed in the game. Earlier last year, my ping was hovering anywhere between around 15 and 50. Now it's consistently over 100. This, I feel, can affect far more matches than any number of limited BR changes and must be fixed as soon as possible. Add into that the massive lag that's in each match and so on and so forth, and you have a mess where people die when they shouldn't, people don't get seen, so on and so forth. It's just a huge mess. Second, BRD compression. There needs to be a system that is better than the semi-automated system that Gaijin currently employs. If you did not know, Gaijin employs an algorithm that looks at win-loss rates of vehicles and changes BRs accordingly. This does not take into account armor, stats, weapons, etc. Just, as far as I know, win rate. This is a huge issue in top and near top tier and really needs to be fixed. Again, they kind of need a player council or a series of beta testers or whoever that can make recommendations on BR changes. This would go a huge way towards improving not only Gaijin and player relations, but also towards creating a much better game in the future where less controversial BR changes are being enacted every few months. And finally, bug fixes. This is self-explanatory, but for a long time and even still to a point, ghost shells have plagued this game. Though there are no real game-breaking issues at the moment as far as I'm aware, visual glitches and things of that nature should be fixed as they make this game look unfinished, especially to new people who have never experienced all that War Thunder is capable of. Aside from this, War Thunder, I'll say, is pretty well optimized, so good job, Gaijin. Now, for wants and quality of life improvements, I'll start with new game modes. War Thunder is essentially the same game that it has been for the better part of its existence. Sure, there have been improvements here and there, some modes like World War mode, and also some other improvements like volumetric shells if you consider how they employed them to be an improvement, but they're essentially the same everyday game modes with the same ways to play them. While content has been added, the way to play this game has been static for years. Second, a new loadout system. If we could customize loadouts, especially for planes, this would be a huge draw for new people and also for War Thunder's consistent player base. Even if we kept it historical, it would multiply the possible ways to play almost every single plane by several times. I know it would likely be a ton of work through research, but this is something that people have wanted for a substantial amount of time. The time to enact it is now, Gaijin, especially with the complainers filing complaints at an all-time high. Additionally, I would love to see new bomber cockpit modeling and the addition of new bombers. Now this is self-explanatory, but a ton of bombers are still without their proper cockpits. This makes the game look cheesy, especially to newcomers. Additionally, some new bombers, especially some fast jet bombers or some immediately post-World War II jet bombers, will go a long way towards closing the bomber gap that we currently see in game. I, for one, would love to see the B-58 Hustler or even I believe it's the XB-47 Mixmaster. Those planes would be amazing in game and they wouldn't be OP or sitting ducks. Get on it, Gaijin. Additionally, we should implement some sort of advanced testing group that helps to weed out issues prior to content rolling out in this game, as well as to provide advice as to what new BR vehicles should be sitting at. Now, I'm sure tons of volunteers who have years of experience in this game would love to get their hands on vehicles before everyone else, even if it means essentially beta testing them on a closed server. This would be a great way, again, and I mentioned this exact thing just a few moments ago, to build Gaijin and content creator, sort of relations. That way people don't complain nearly as much, and it also makes people much more in one with the game and feel invested with the game. Look, whether you decide to listen to this point in the video and agree or disagree with my main issue here that a disproportionately large amount of War Thunder YouTubers are complaining about, for the most part, relatively small issues, I think we can all agree that we should take a step back and enjoy this game if we want to continue playing it. If not, people considering playing this game will catch on to the negativity and look elsewhere, which will sooner or later kill the player base. One of the main reasons why Gaijin constantly introduces new vehicles, aside from selling them to diehards who buy every premium that gets released, is to draw in new players who hear about a new vehicle and decide to play War Thunder in order to buy it, even if they stop playing War Thunder after just a few weeks. In fact, the majority of money given by a player is given within 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks of playing a new game. These new players keep the game alive by helping to keep Gaijin in business. Unfortunately, because this is the #1 priority with Gaijin, they will likely never truly make other things like gameplay improvements, a better BR system, and so forth the #1 thing on their list. Additionally, with Enlisted taking up more and more of their resources, one must wonder if War Thunder will take a backseat in terms of priority or funding. My somewhat scattered thoughts aside, I want to end this video on a positive note. We are getting closer and closer to the F-14 and A-10, which are planes that, despite me kind of going off on content versus gameplay earlier in this video, we all want, among their Soviet counterparts, of course. There is still plenty to be excited about regarding War Thunder, and perhaps once content creation slows, we may very well start to see those gameplay changes that we all want. And hopefully sooner than later we can get those server fixes that are becoming necessary to maintain the immediate player base of War Thunder. Again, hopefully this all happens sooner than later, as content really is not as important as upgrades to the foundation of this game, but we'll see. Further, let's all be a bit less reactionary to the next patch that comes out, and each patch thereafter, as when they're first released they may have some issues. Give it a few days and judge them by their content at that point. Don't just flip out because one thing is not to your liking. It's the nature of the beast. Sometimes patches are not perfect upon release. That goes for any game. We must all do our part and help to be better and more constructive. That said, thanks so much for watching, everyone. I hope you don't hate me after watching this video. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Otherwise, please subscribe if you have not done so already, as I primarily create guides and helpful tips for those who want to get better at War Thunder or just want to hear a different perspective about how to play the game. That said, thanks again, everyone, and I will see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone.